haven't already done so, please turn off your electronic devices, although they may be hacked. So, but try to turn them off. I want to briefly highlight a couple of upcoming programs, and you'll see the diversity of our offerings. Our next program, after this evening's event with Mr. Nance, our next program on November 9th, we will be hosting Anthony Scaramucci, the former White House Communications Director. We are a truly nonpartisan podium. On November the 13th, we go in a completely different direction. On November the 13th, we will be at the Penn Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology for an event featuring Wendy Perlman, a Mideast expert, award-winning professor, and author of We Crossed a Bridge and It Trembled, Voices from Syria, a compilation of interviews and stories from Syrian refugees. It truly promises to be a powerful event. And the guests who attend this event will also have exclusive access to the Penn Museum's Cultures in the Crossfire Stories from Syria and Iraq exhibition. The museum is generally closed on Mondays, but it will be open for our program attendees for a private viewing with the museum curator. Then on December 13th, our last event of this calendar year, we will be hosting a really broad and deep discussion of the American healthcare system with a panel at Thomas Jefferson University, panel including Dr. Stephen Klasko, President and CEO of Thomas Jefferson, Dan Hilferty, CEO of Independence Blue Cross, and I'm not going to give you the whole list. It's about 5 other people, all of whom have different points of view, very different points of view about healthcare and health policy. Now, on to tonight's program. First, I want to thank Bob Kane, Regional President of KeyBank and a Director of the World Affairs Council, for sponsoring this evening's event. Before I ask Bob to formally introduce Malcolm Nance, I just want to pause to note something that's not in Malcolm's official resume, but you're going to hear more about tonight. I'm proud to say that this distinguished student and practitioner of American spycraft tells us that he found his passion and his career direction in no small part because of his participation in the World Affairs Council's high school programs while he was a student at West Catholic High School. Truly, this happens about once a year that the council, in its current incarnation, finds an alumni of our middle and high school programs doing all sorts of important work, and we're always especially thrilled to host one of them back at this podium. So with that, I turn it over to Bob Kane.
Well, a Bonner guy introducing a West Catholic guy. That's the way it goes. Thanks, Greg. KeyBank is a proud supporter of the World Affairs Council of Philadelphia, and we're delighted to take part as a sponsor of this event. KeyBank, we know that informed and engaged citizens create healthy neighborhoods and communities, which is central to our work. Each day we attempt to give back to the neighborhoods in which we live and work, and part of that is working with remarkable organizations like the World Affairs Council, which presents important speakers, like the one this evening. Our speaker tonight is Malcolm W. Nance, with over 33 years of experience in combating radical extremism. Mr. Nance is an honorable retired United States Navy Senior Chief Petty Officer who specialized in naval cryptology and was involved in numerous counterterrorism, intelligence, and combat operations during his years of service. He spent more than 2 decades on clandestine anti-terrorism and counterterrorism intelligence operations in the Middle East, North Africa, the Balkans, Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, in direct support of special operations and intelligence community. In addition to founding the Advanced Terrorism Abduction and Hostage Survival Schools, he has trained and advised in numerous defense, intelligence, and law enforcement agencies worldwide in understanding and exploiting terrorist strategies, tactics, ideology to combat the spread of radical extremism. With that, which I would please like to welcome Malcolm Nance.
"37 years. That's how long it took you guys to invite me back." I was actually vice president of the youth program back in the late 70s, and I loved the World Affairs Council. Am I a member now? Need to make sure. The worst part is I've been in and out of Philadelphia. We have a house here in Philadelphia for the last couple of years. My wife was working here. And I've already spoken in 2 other World Affairs Councils before this one. And I'm horribly embarrassed that I'm just getting around to you guys now. I'm glad to be home. I really am just thrilled to speak in front of adults now, as opposed to a bunch of high school students. With that, we have about 30 minutes, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through my presentation, and we're going to have a little sit down, and then a discussion, and then the most important part, which is answering your questions. And with that, let me start that. And you'll find out that I don't give speeches, I just talk. And if any of you have ever seen me on MSNBC, where I work now, or CNN, where I've been before, or even that rare time I was on Fox, back when they had journalists. There's Tony Snow. Yeah, not like he died. But you'll notice that I am speaking to you in the exact same voice that I speak on television. I do not know I'm on television most of the time. They sit me in a room with people and they ask me questions and I answer them. And that's what I'm going to do with you tonight. So there's no punditry involved. With that, as I said, get that next picture. There you go. That's what I'm most famous for, which is being the mad photo bomber of MSNBC. Joy Reid, whenever she does her program, if you notice on Saturday and you go on her Instagram page, she takes a selfie with everyone who comes on set. And I have a reputation now of jumping into the photographs. And Donna Brazil is the least person whose photo I've ruined. But I do have a broader and deeper career other than the mad photo bomber. This is me on the day of my retirement from the US Navy. And I had a wonderful career. And before any of you ever think of saying thank you for your service, I say, don't thank me. I got to do all sorts of fun stuff. You have to thank my wife and my mother, all right? Navy wife, hardest job in the Navy. But I carried out a wide variety of covert, clandestine, and overt intelligence collection operations. I started as a cryptologist, a cryptologic linguist, which is a person who speaks foreign languages and then breaks codes, which of course come out into a foreign language. Interesting fact, I grew up in West Philadelphia. I grew up in Winfield, near St. Joe's University, and back when it was a very deep Orthodox Jewish neighborhood. The first language I ever learned, or any words I ever learned, was Yiddish. And in fact, one day when I was 10 years old, I found a Yiddish newspaper blowing around in the street. I wanted to understand what it said. I took it to the library, the Free Library of Philadelphia in Winfield, and I asked, do you have a book of the alphabet for this thing, which is Hebrew alphabet? And the woman looked at me like I was crazy. And she said, why do you want that? I said, I want to know what it says. And she gave me a little bata, aleph bata dictionary, and I broke out the Yiddish. And I learned a very valuable lesson in code breaking. Everything decrypts into a foreign language. So it was still Yiddish when I finished, but that was my first decrypt. And from there, I went on to a career where I did all sorts of fun things in buildings with no windows and rooms with cipher locked doors. But a component of that was my involvement in special operations cryptology, which I can't tell you anything about, but I did get to, go to very interesting places, and as a matter of fact, that's North Africa, and do lots of fun things, whether sometimes I would take a SEAL platoon with me to protect me, and sometimes they would take me to find out what was going on, and I've served on ships, aircraft, and submarines. That's even more interesting, that I served in the Balkans. But there were times in my career where they would say, and this almost became my middle name, we need a black guy that speaks Arabic. Because I'll tell you a little secret. In our preeminent intelligence agency in Langley, Virginia, their greatest source of recruitment is Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah. And there's not a lot of guys like me at Brigham Young University. They all speak foreign languages, they've all been around, but they cannot go into the Sahel, which is this place right here, that's North Africa, that's Arab Saharan North Africa. Dress like a local, keep your mouth shut, and get away with it. As a matter of fact, you know, the little bicycles in Books of Mormon give it away. So every once in a while, when I was at my parent agency, which was the National Security Agency, I would be tasked out to another government agency. And I would move into the world away from signals intelligence to human intelligence. But, you know, as time progressed, the missions became more and more difficult. This is me in the first Gulf War. I'm sorry, not the first Gulf War. That's me in Iraq in 2003, where I became an intelligence contractor for the US government, which is doing the same job for a boatload more money without the pension. And, you know, the combat operations that I was being involved in were far, far more complex and deeply ingrained in terrorism. And they never ended. As a matter of fact, you know, some people might be able to identify where I'm at in that photograph. But at some point, my wife got sick of it, and she said, you need to start writing books. So what I started doing was doing a brain dump of everything that I knew, and the Terrorist Recognition Handbook was my first book. My second book was an in-country, I wrote it while I was in Iraq, study of every terrorist group in Iraq. That was the first book to write about what would become ISIS. At that time, it was called the Islamic State of Iraq. I wrote my magnum opus, my book on Al-Qaeda, which was the first book on ideology of terrorist groups. And that was between 2007 and 2010. And by 2014, everybody would be saying, what's the ideology of these groups? And I would say, for $1, you can go on Amazon and you can buy a whole book about that ideology, but they might charge you shipping. So, 2 years ago, I wrote this book, Defeating ISIS, and a quick note about that. It's a very large book. It's the Encyclopedia of ISIS. And one day I got a call from Time Magazine last July. And Time Magazine said, hey, can we get you for a quote? And I said, well, why am I being quoted? He says, well, you didn't hear? Donald Trump said your book was the last book he read. I said, it's 544 pages. Maybe he was going by Hudson Books in an airport. He saw it phase out. He goes, Defeating ISIS, love it. Read. So, that being said, I do have another book that came out this year, Hacking ISIS. But we're going to talk today about the book that I wrote in between these last year, which is Plot to Hack America. But before, as we said, I did start here in the World Affairs Council, and I ran the World Affairs Club at West Catholic Boys High School. In fact, the council sent me this photograph of me with a globe. And I don't know if any of you saw the expose done on me by the Philadelphia Inquirer this year. They were doing like 30 days of well-known African-American Philadelphians, and they had a picture of me with a globe. And I didn't realize it until I saw this photograph, that's why I picked up the globe. But the world is a wide and diverse place. I love being out in the world. My wife and I just came back from Poland and Scandinavia, and you know, we travel all over the world. We lived in the Middle East for the last 7 years. We were living in Abu Dhabi, but working in Iraq and Libya and Syria and all these other places. And this is what I try to impart to everyone that's in the youth program when I meet them. Number one, don't go in the military. And if you do, go in after you've gotten your degree, all right? So that you can sign off on all the work that I do. But I want people to understand that this is not just, you know, it's not just a place that you fly to Paris every once in a while, although that's awesome. Everything we do, every aspect of our lives is integrated with the rest of the world. And that's why it drives me crazy when I hear people say, oh, you know, you're an elitist globalist. Well, America created globalism with World War II. We built everything everybody in the world wanted. And that's why we need to be involved in the world. Now we're going to talk about another aspect of being involved in the world. And that's how we got to where we are today. And interesting point of fact. In fact, the plot to hack America was written in 5 weeks. And it is, I get interviewed about this all the time. They say, wow, how did you write a book in 5 weeks? Number one, it's very easy. I'm not a journalist. Journalists actually have to go get sources. They actually have to fact check everything. They're waiting for the story to end so that it has a beautiful beginning and a wonderful ending. What Plot to Hack America was a very rapid fire, field written intelligence analysis on the basis of a depth of career experience and observing observable facts as the intelligence community sees it. So when you read that book, you're going to see, and what we're going to talk about tonight is how the intelligence community sees it. I started that book on July 25th. I finished it on September 2nd. It went to publication on September 23rd. Interestingly enough, the identical report, the CIA's report, went to President Obama on September 23rd. And it's not a coincidence. It's just that they had 3 watch shifts working on it, and I could take 1 watch shift off and go to sleep. But they had secret information, so it took a higher classification process. But we produced identical reports on identical days. Mine was open source, theirs was classified. And it came to the exact same conclusions. So either we are all collectively crazy in the US intelligence community, or we see patterns and activities that the average person can't. And that's what I tried to get out with my book. So, how did the plot to hack America manifest itself? Well, first, as I said, my book was an intelligence analysis of Russian actions. It is not an analysis of the Trump campaign, although we do put a lot of information that they used in there, but it is mainly how the spy master-in-chief, Vladimir Putin, brought about what could arguably call the greatest intelligence operation in history. I'm on the board of the International Spy Museum, and one of my peers on the board is the former director of the CIA, John Brennan, and he calls it the greatest operation in the history of Russian intelligence, even going back past Ivan the Great. So, in 2015, a foreign intelligence agency attacked the United States, and that agency is what we used to call the KGB. I got into an interesting fight with Glenn Greenwald of The Intercept when he said, "You have no idea what you're talking about. The KGB ceased to exist 25 years ago." No, the letters of the KGB ceased to exist 25 years ago, but their budget grew 5 times what it was. They got modern technology and billions of dollars in oil revenue, and we're going to talk about where they came from. When the CIA did their report, like all good spy operations, and we hate the word spy, by the way, that's the people we get to betray their country, but we'll use it for the purposes of this. They give it a code name. The CIA and FBI called it Operation Grizzly Steppe, the Russian hacking of the democratic process in the United States. In my book, I give it a cooler name, which was Operation Lucky 7. And because the number 7 is very significant in the Russian Orthodox Church. And it just sounded cool, like it should be in a movie. But, Grizzly Steppe, okay, we'll roll with that. But as you see, intelligence operatives always think alike. Both agencies and myself came up with a cool operations name. But this is the person we're dealing with. This is Vladimir Putin, in the rank of major in the KGB. His job in East Germany was to hire spies to go into West Germany and steal computer technology, which would be brought in and incorporated into the KGB's data mining operations and data processing operations. This is what the future president of Russia did. He stole advanced computer technology and he used it against the West. Now, that being done, you might notice that we're talking about the period of the Soviet Union, when the KGB was the preeminent organization. When the KGB left, that, by the way, is a photograph of a march, one of the last marches of the KGB. That's Russian special operations subordinate to the KGB. This is the FSB. KGB, FSB. Anybody notice any differences? There is no difference except the 3 letters, and they have a much larger budget. Russian intelligence organization has 4 principal components. You're always hearing about the FSB, which is essentially the KGB minus the border guards. The SVR is their actual clandestine service. That would be the equivalent of the clandestine service of the CIA, the Directorate of Operations. It's called the SVR. GRU is Russian Military Intelligence, our equivalent of Defense Intelligence Agency, which was the agency General Mike Flynn was director of. Interesting fact, Mike Flynn is the only US military officer ever to visit the headquarters of the GRU. He was welcomed in there. That may play a role in his future, because there's a lot of inference that he may have become just too enamored with them, and that may have made him susceptible to the trouble that he got himself in later. And finally, the one that virtually no one knows, the SCIS, the Special Communications Information Service, Russia's NSA. And they operate all signals intelligence and cyber warfare assets of Russia. And now, the former director of the FSB, KGB, is now the president of Russia. And like all good spy masters, you know, when you come in charge of a nation, the first thing you want to do is see what really cool operations are in play. Vladimir Putin has never left the mindset of a Soviet intelligence officer. And I use the name Soviet deliberately. He has the mindset of a former communist spy. And like all good former communist spies, you take on the ideology that you were raised in. And one of the ideologies that he believes fervently is liberal Western democracy is a failure. And even though he now lives in essentially an oligarchical dictatorship, he still believes that American ideology of democracy is failed. So when he became president of Russia in 2001, the first thing he did was he started dismantling all of the democratic institutions that were in part of the new Russia under Boris Yeltsin. And he did it. First thing he did was he bought the news media, literally had his oligarchs buy all the channels. But to keep the trappings of a democracy, he leaves one opposition media organization so that he can say, no, look, we have opposition over here speaking. Same thing with television channels. They are all state-run, with the exception of one web cyber media channel that is allowed to broadcast from there. But like all good ex-spies, one phrase that all of you are going to learn tonight, you're going to learn a couple of phrases, is the term active measures. Active measures are aggressive intelligence operations that are carried out for the purposes of advancing state ideology. This photograph is Boris Nemetsov, an opposition figure in the modern Russia. He was seen as a great challenger of Vladimir Putin. That's a photograph of him waking up dead with 4 bullets in his back. Interestingly, the night that he was shot next to the Kremlin, in the one place where there was not one vehicle legally parked anywhere in Red Square, he was shot to death behind a truck that was conveniently located there. And then suddenly drove off and disappeared, and they've never found it. That is how Vladimir Putin gets rid of his opposition. He has them killed, he carries out an investigation, and of course, lo and behold, Boris Nemetsov is wrapped up with the mob or the mafia or Russian intelligence. He's even implied that he was killed by the CIA and British MI6. In the Soviet Union period, these activities were considered their active measures. Covert intelligence collection, kompromat, which is called blackmail. You're going to hear that word a lot in this last election season. Blackmail, disinformation, assassination, and state propaganda. But Malcolm, what's the difference between then and now? Well, now, it's the same thing, except it has one last facet, and that's cyber warfare. They can now project state propaganda, disseminate political warfare products using the power of the internet. And the best part about it is they can make it appear as if they are using free speech to disseminate their message, and they can attach their message to our free speech. So in fact, a key component of Russian active measures is to weaponize liberal democracy and freedom of speech for their state active measures, for their state purposes. Let's take a quick look at the chain of command. Vladimir Putin is the person who ordered the hacking of the US election. And before we get into the dynamics of the hacking, in fact, he didn't hack the voter rolls, so far as we know. That's still up in the air. But what he did hack was the mindset of the American public. Every one of you got hacked. Has anybody heard that Hillary Clinton had an email server in her house? And did you hear that there were emails sent to John Podesta? And one of them was a risotto recipe? Tell me you didn't hear about the risotto recipe. I challenge you. Maybe 2 or 3 of you. Everyone heard about it. The point is, those media statements were magnified and amplified by Vladimir Putin's management team, which included his richest friends, the oligarchs, the director of the Foreign Intelligence Agency, and his state advisors. Beneath that, they created an information warfare management cell. This is a big intelligence organization, and below them, they had a subcontractor agency you're going to hear a lot about, and have been hearing a lot about this week, the Internet Research Agency. These are civilian subcontractors, kids in university, fluent in English, who get on Twitter and Facebook, and they pretend to be American citizens. On the other side, you have the Russian clandestine service, military intelligence, the foreign ministry, and their cyber warfare agency, the SCIS. So when did this start, Malcolm? My assessment is that it started here, at Miss Universe. In 2013, Donald Trump was invited to do Miss Universe. The Apprentice was one of the top shows in Russia. They loved his dictatorial style. And they loved, "You're fired," because that's a very Stalinistic phrase, right? When Donald Trump went to Miss Universe, the one thing that I can tell you from an intelligence perspective, which would have been fascinating, I would have loved to have been at the Russia SCIS, was that he carried an unsecured telephone. You carry an unsecured telephone and you are under a state-controlled intelligence agency like Russia's version of NSA, then we own you. Okay, I have owned people in this world. When I say owned, I mean there is not a facet of their life that I don't know. Okay, you have a mistress, I know it. You have a mistress on your mistress, I know it. You're doing illicit funds and you think that you're going to be able to use some code? We're bored, okay? We got nothing to do but to break your little code system. And if I can't do it, we have an entire agency designed to come up with all the little euphemisms that you're using. And we have computers that are smarter than us that can bring all that out. Donald Trump went to Miss Universe with an unsecured telephone. And from that point on, Russian intelligence would have made him a nationally tasked target, which means they know everything about him. If he carried out any business deals while he was there that would have benefited Russia, Russia would have beat him to the market. They would have known everything about what he was going to do that day, about what he was going to do for dinner, how he spoke to his wife, how he spoke to his child. You can learn a lot when a person talks on your telephone. But interestingly enough, that wasn't as important as the relationship with this family. This is Armin Agalarov to the right, the young man, and that's his father to the left, who invited him to do Miss Universe. They are Russian oligarchs. And while at Miss Universe, they got Donald Trump to believe that he was going to meet Vladimir Putin at every turn. And if you watch the videos of Donald Trump at Miss Universe, he is desperate to meet Vladimir Putin. And there's a reason he's desperate to meet Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump is not worth as much money as he says he is. Everybody knows that. If you go to, a good friend of mine is Tim O'Brien, the man who wrote the book on Donald Trump, and who was a close personal friend for a while. And he said, everyone knows that he couldn't get a loan in the United States. He may be owed as much as $440 million to an unidentified country that was loaning him money through a bank. But while he was there, he saw the trappings of Russian power, modern Russian power. Stretch Mercedes-Benz limousine with your bodyguards in German G-Wagons. Donald Trump loved the trappings of the Russian state. He loved how Russia would have their military parades, and he wanted that. How many times have you heard just this year Donald Trump say that he wanted to start having parades every year in front of the White House. He got that from his trip to Russia. He also fell in love with the idea of being an oligarch. You can not only kill a polar bear, you can take your picture on it, all right? The oligarchy of Russia offered a lot for somebody who wanted the trappings of power, but more importantly, unlimited money. And that's what they believe is why Donald Trump started mouthing the foreign policy of Russia, including the elimination of NATO, the dissolution of the European Union. Prior to 2016, no one could figure out where Donald Trump got these ideas. I have personally tasked reporters for the Washington Post and the New York Times to get me the day that Donald Trump adopted an anti-NATO position. The belief that globalism and global power and global markets were an anathema to the American market. That's insane. We created it. But somehow he adopted these positions, which are all in line with the Kremlin. And even more interesting, Donald Trump cannot say a negative word about Vladimir Putin, ever. In fact, he has insulted the United States before he's insulted the Kremlin. This is Yuri Bezmenov, a former KGB officer. And on that screen is an acronym we use in the intelligence community when we're recruiting agents. It's called MICE, M-I-C-E. And we use these 4 factors to turn someone into an asset or an agent. One is money. You always offer money. People will sell their countries for money. The second is ideology. You get them to start believing what you believe. Third, if they're hard, you coerce them, which is compromat, blackmail. Or, if you do it right, you will co-opt them, and they will lovingly and willingly run into your arms because they like you. And finally, you massage their ego. And I like Yuri Bezmenov because his videos used to be classified. You can watch them now on YouTube. And my favorite video is when he talks about Kgb recruitment. And he made this statement about recruiting targets. The KGB recruits people who lack moral principles, who are either too greedy or suffer from self-importance. They feel that they matter a lot. These are the people the KGB wants and seeks to recruit. Greedy, arrogant, self-important, narcissistic. I mean, these are all the letter E under ego. This statement, by the way, was made in 1985. This is a very old school operation. And they recruit people. The Russians collect people and they keep them in their pocket. Even if they don't think you're going to amount to anything, they just like to have those people. So a person of the stature of Donald Trump, who was running one of the top shows in Russia, it would have been a national priority to get him on your side, even if he wasn't an actual asset. So was there a conspiracy to steal the election? Well, there sure seems to be a lot of coincidences. I'm the father of an intelligence community law, or at least I tell people that. It's called Nance's Law. Nance's Law of Intelligence Kismet. Coincidence takes a lot of planning. A lot of planning. In November 15th, Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's personal lawyer, sends an email to the campaign saying, we have spoken to the Russians. The Russians want to see you elected. We're going to get you elected President of the United States. A month later, Vladimir Putin does a very public endorsement of him when there were still 16 Republicans on the stage. Everyone took that as very significant. March 2016, the DNC hack was revealed. June 2016, an entity called Guccifer 2.0 popped up and said, I have all of the emails stolen from the DNC servers. The entities that actually hack the DNC servers are not people. They are a malware suite which goes in, strips things, and goes out. They were used in multiple parts of the world in multiple intelligence operations. And the way that we know that they're Russian is we literally track them back to the servers that are physically located in either Russian military intelligence headquarters or buildings that belong to Russian clandestine service. So it would be like tracking a server back to Fort Meade, Maryland, where NSA is. The first one is ATP-28, that stands for Advanced Persistent Threat 28, nicknamed Fancy Bear. That was Russian military intelligence, I'm sorry, Russian clandestine service. And then the other one is Cozy Bear. Those were nicknames given to these Russian cyber warfare tools. But Cozy Bear, 2 years earlier, was used in taking down 3 power plants in the Ukraine that took power from 100,000 people. When you take down power plants, people die. Respirators stop, pacemakers stop, all of these things go offline. Children die in incubators. Russia deliberately took those power plants down, but it had the fingerprints of Cozy Bear. The German Bundestag was hacked, Cozy Bear. The Department of Defense was hacked at one point, Cozy Bear. TV France 5 was hacked, Fancy Bear. We are not making these things up. They have fingerprints on their cyber warfare tools, and we have the capacity to track them. They were the 2 entities that were all over the DNC servers. In fact, I met the head of one of the cybersecurity companies that was called in on the DNC hacking. He said for 2 weeks they let the Russians run rampant, and they literally watched them move folders out, over, and they tracked them back to Russian military intelligence headquarters. There was no insider stealing things with a flash memory. The entire collective knowledge of the US intelligence agrees it is these 2 cyber entities. But what they did do is they did Watergate. This is Watergate 2.0. They went into the servers of the DNC. They didn't have to break in and put tape over the garage door like the White House, the plumbers did in 1973. They just went in with cyber systems and stole everything. Passwords, they watched every chat for a year, they stole every credit card, everything that was inside the servers of the DNC was stolen. And they didn't show up until a month later. And then 2 months later, WikiLeaks comes out and starts selectively releasing all of this, swearing to God that none of this came from Russia. In fact, they have been called a non-state intelligence agency by the CIA. They operated as a laundromat for Russian intelligence, knowing it's Russian intelligence, because everyone and their dog is on television saying it's Russian intelligence. Besides, how else would it have been done? Interesting point of fact, this is where WikiLeaks launched its first information-guided weapon. At the first day of the Democratic National Committee, with the intent to split the Democratic Party into 2. And they released all the emails from Debbie Wasserman Schultz related to Hillary Clinton and said that they were cheating and had cheated Bernie Sanders out of the election. I was in Philadelphia at that point. I was on Independence Hall at the broadcast booth, and they had a walkout. And they did do severe damage to the Democratic Party. That was the intent of launching that cyber weapon system. 2 days later, Donald Trump went on television and said, Russia, if you're listening, please release the 30,000 hacked emails you stole from Hillary Clinton's server. In my world, that is foreshadowing. You are telling us that you had a discussion with someone and you had information with someone about that email in those servers. At that point, Donald Trump went from an unwitting entity to quite possibly an active asset. Now there's different operations jobs. There's entity, there's an asset who actually works for you. He may not know it, he may. And then there's an agent. He's not an agent. He's an asset at this point. And an unwitting one, the day before he made that statement. At that point, he knew Russia was actively working in his interests. And then went out and bragged about it. Within a month, you had the Podesta leaks. Roger Stone, who I've met, he's a squirrely little character, said in a couple of days, or what did he say, Wednesday? Hillary's campaign is over on Wednesday because he had all of the emails which ATP-28, Fancy Bear, and Cozy Bear had also stolen from the private server that hosted John Podesta's risotto recipe. I want to point something out to you. In the entire time of this campaign, there is not one email that was released which was stolen from Hillary Clinton's private server, which, by the way, was in a secure room under Secret Service protection. but everybody else's emails got hacked. Very common tactic. If you can't get to the target, you go around the target and you get to the people who would communicate with them, and that's what happened. We've seen, and you'll hear a lot more about this, Facebook, Twitter were weaponized. This is a photograph that I saw all the time. It was being repeated all throughout the internet, right? Devil Barack Obama burning the Constitution. These active measures that the Russians were using also included marionetting. I'm going to show you an example of marionetting. You're going to like this. Marionetting was when you create a fake American entity on Facebook or Twitter. You get that entity to communicate with real Americans, and then you make those real Americans do something. Now, they think they're talking to an American, and in fact, they're talking to a person who is pulling strings over you like a marionette. Their job is to change your reality, create an alternative ideology, and of course, influence simple minds. They did marionetting in Charlottesville. They carried out rallies in southern Florida in which they were calling for people to show up with signs, but it was a guy living in Russia, and Americans showed up at these rallies with signs to protest immigration, not even knowing the person who had organized it was not American and not in the United States. And here's a good example of one. Whoops. This is Joy Reid. For about a month, a whole series of tweets about myself and Joy Reid were showing up on the internet. This one showed Joy Reid as Joseph Goebbels, which is interesting because when I was on Bill Maher, I not only once, but twice made a very funny Goebbels joke. I don't know if any of you saw that. Baby Goebbels? No? Okay. And then suddenly, Joy Reid starts getting smeared with my joke. But 72 hours before we went to a conference called Politicon in Pasadena, this internet bot, which we had identified as a bot, appeared to have been retasked into what we call a threat bot or an assassination bot. And as you can see, it says, "Thanks, Dusty. I need all the publicity I can get before I come after Malcolm Nance, and I'll be after Joy Reid at her gig at Politicon, fake news." I don't have the other tweets. We have 3 more tweets where they actually put the date, time, and location of our panel. And the guy was saying, "I am coming to kill them." We had to have extra security. Immediately, I kicked out my friends from the National Security Agency, and within 15 minutes, we found out that this was a bot operating from St. Petersburg, Russia, that was entering the United States through Denver. The guy claimed he was in Denver, but he had joined all of the Southern California alt-right forums. And what he said was this. Put that awesome, awful photograph of me. I don't mind having a bad picture of me. If you can't see it, there's a sniper crosshair on top of me, overlaid on me. That's an awful crosshair. I trained as a sniper. You're not going to hit anything with that crosshair. But he says, "Warning, Malcolm Nance for inciting ISIS to suicide bomb a Trump hotel." And again, reprogram that message to say, "I'm coming to kill him at Politicon." The effect that we saw was we expected not this individual, who we knew was in Russia, we expected all the people he was saying, "Come see me kill them," were going to show up in the audience. And then he was going to manipulate them through their voices and their mouths. They were going to be alt-writers in the sea of liberals, or at least the sea of news media. And that's what we call marionetting. The key question that's out there is, were there Americans who were involved in sharpening that Russian product and putting it precisely where the votes needed to go? We don't know. That's what's being investigated in the Mueller investigation. But if you heard the news today, Cambridge Analytica, the data analysis company for the Trump campaign, of which Jared Kushner and Steve Bannon were on the board of directors and were paid $5.9 million, admitted that they reached out to WikiLeaks and asked WikiLeaks to give them all of Hillary Clinton's emails before the Democratic National Committee convention. And WikiLeaks says, "No, we didn't give them anything." Really? I'm going to wait for the special counsel to look into that before I start taking people's word for it. So why? Why? Was it really all about this? Young love? Did Donald Trump just want to be riding a horse naked with, half naked with Vladimir Putin? It sort of seems that way because if you ask him to say something bad about Putin, that image pops into your head. In the intelligence community, the word why is the most important component of our analysis. You don't care how, we know how. We can watch how. But your motivation for doing something is more important than anything else. I assess that the goal is that the Russians, by their own admission, is that they believe liberal democracy as it exists in the United States just should not exist. They believe that there should be an axis of autocrats. This photograph was a propaganda drawing that went around on Facebook and Twitter of Marine Le Pen, Donald Trump, and Vladimir Putin as knights leading Western civilization. And if it couldn't get more explicit, this drawing was put out by Russian trolls of Nigel Farage, Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and in the back, Marine Le Pen as Marie France. And this is their idea, an axis of autocracies, with the United States anchoring the West, France anchoring the Europe, Britain as a cripple, because they're going to lose all of their economic wealth due to Brexit, and Russia to the east, and they would create this Western Christendom axis of countries led by oligarchs. The problem is, liberal democracy, as Jefferson founded and wrote in this city, is in the way. And right now, Donald Trump is running into obstacle after obstacle. And the biggest obstacle that he seems to have is democracy. Can't get his legislation passed, he lashes out at the news media. Can't get, all the Democrats onto his side or any Democrats onto his side, it's a conspiracy. These are things that no other president had a problem with. But now we do. Because he cannot think democratically. And I'm saying that if he were the president of Rwanda, I would be giving this exact same assessment with a lot more jokes. But, Sub-Saharan Africa dictator feels that he is not being treated well in a democratic society after he executes his votes, right? That's the kind of analytical sentence we would write about a dictator. I'm not saying Donald Trump is a dictator. I'm just saying he sure likes Vladimir Putin. So what's next? This is what's next. I call this the wood chipper of justice. That's my pet name for Mueller investigation. I know I'm going over, but one last joke. When Mueller took over the investigation, this is actually true. When he took over the investigation, he sat down at Jim Comey's desk. He got the outline report on the investigation into Russian influence and, of course, obstruction of justice charges, which may or may not be pending. He sat down, he read through that, and at 3 o'clock the same day that he got that report, he picked up the phone and he hired the first person that he needed for his investigation. He hired the director of the Treasury's Financial Crimes Division. He didn't hire any more spy hunters. And then he hired 16 more of the top financial fraud and crime lawyers in the United States. Now, that's called a significant intelligence indicator in my world. He knows something, but more importantly, he knows that it stems from money and it revolves around money. And that's why he has 17 of the top prosecutors in America, including the guy that took down Enron and who left that investigation to go after New York City mafia money laundering. That's two interesting skill sets. And that's where we are today. So, my last point is this. I'm calling on you. We're in a very unique spot. We're all very well educated in here, or at least have some measure of common sense. I mean, you're here to listen to me. But for the most part, we are in a struggle for democracy. Democracy as we all knew it. And it's up to you, every person in here, to do something about it, whether you think it's right, whether you think it's wrong. But that's what I'm calling on you to do. But now you understand why the intelligence community seems to be getting a lot of guff from the White House. Because everything I told you has been written in a report somewhere, or has been presented to the president himself. and certainly has been presented to the American public, because if you read the last section of my book, Plot to Hack America, we included the CIA report, which is identical to the previous 150 pages. Don't take my word on it. Take the word of the people who come in every day, who walk past the Nathan Hale statue at the CIA or the Wall of Honor at NSA, you will never meet these people, and they're wonderful. And they don't have any time to listen to your telephone calls or read your emails, because we only got 3 watch shifts in a day, and we're really busy. All right? Those people are out to keep you safe. Now it's your job to keep all the rest of us safe. All right, with that, thanks for coming.
All right, in the interest of time, we're going to go right to questions from all of you. We have microphones set up for people who'd like to come and ask a question.
Yeah. Give me a shout out to my West Catholic over there. Woo!
All right, who wants to go first? Come on up.
Does it take a president to look at truth, or if you believe the president is going to see something only one way? Does it still, can any type of Mueller report be successful without a president looking at things in an honest, objective way? Or does the president still, I think he's setting us up with this false news because he sort of has an idea of what's out there.
Yeah.
So what part can he eventually play in this? What if he just says, it doesn't really matter?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question, because when I ran the terrorist survival school for the Tier 1 special operations as Delta and SEAL Team 6. We would actually kidnap people. And we had classes in Stockholm Syndrome. And one of the things we would do is we'd run you through a full-scale kidnapping. And the first thing we would teach you is, everyone has a job. Terrorist's job is to terrorize you, right? Beat you, and to select a hostage to be executed. Your job is to play in such a way as you're not the guy who's executed, right? Mueller has a job here of which he is honor-bound and constitutionally bound to execute, no matter what the outcome is. Donald Trump seems to think that he has his own job, which is to stop that at all costs. But I think they're having a hard time convincing him that that is not the job of the President of the United States. And I mean, you know, even Richard Nixon knew that he had to maintain the dignity and the status of the office of the presidency of the United States. And he did, right up to the day he resigned. He didn't tear government down. Have all of you seen the CNN Apple commercial? There's a commercial. It's an apple. It's just an apple in a white field. And the guy goes, "This is an apple." There are some people who will try to tell you it's a banana. There are some people who will shout, "It's a banana," out loud. There are people who will put it in all caps. That's a banana. And some people will get in your face and shout, "Banana, banana, banana, banana." But this is an apple. And they're trying to make a point about the media and the medium that we're all living in today. False news is not news. It's just disinformation. It's obfuscation. You know, it is not information at all. It's people who are trying to change your perception of reality. And unfortunately, again, if he was the vice premier of a Namibian province, I would be saying the same thing, right? This leader seems to work in an alternate reality in which he thinks the news media is in a conspiracy against him. Therefore, he will not participate in our reality. I mean, that's just a fair assessment. I don't care who it is. It could be Kim Jong-un. It could be Vladimir Putin. But that's the way he sees the world. Now, can I point out that he does control 4,000 atomic weapons? Do you want somebody who's controlling atomic bombs to believe that there's a giant conspiracy against him? He does. I'm going to scare the hell out of you before you leave. This is my job.
All right, who's up next?
Good evening again, Malcolm. I'm so happy to have you here. And I have your book, which I've read, and tonight I'm going to get the second copy of that. My question is this. In your book, you touched upon, but didn't go into a lot of detail about Edward Snowden. Now, my question is this. Which version of the truth is it? Did he go to NSA as a naive person, as he basically states, and found all of this monitoring of Americans' telephone, as you mentioned? Or was he intentionally going in, basically in subterfuge, and did that? In any event, the data went to WikiLeaks and he was in Hong Kong with Julian Assange's attorney, an Australian as he is. Also, you said that Assange is a British citizen, which I didn't know. But here's my question. Why is Edward Snowden being protected in Mother Russia? And will he, in effect, die a drunk there, as Kim Philby did in the 50s? Thank you.
Okay. Quick, if you could.
Yeah, I mean,
Big question.
okay, I just gave a speech at the Privacy Exchange Forum in Las Vegas the day before yesterday. And their last speaker, which is a giant forum across the United States, was Edward Snowden. And I was brought in to be the anti-Snowden. Edward Snowden is a defector from US intelligence. He joined the NSA by his own admission in order to steal the information that he took. This is an interesting fact. He social engineered several, maybe as many as a dozen of his peers who were working with him. He'd say, hey man, give me your login, I'm gonna do this for you. And the guy would think, okay, we're all top secret SCI cleared here, we're all buddies, nobody here's a Russian spy. And he sat down, they gave him the thing, and he went in, and that's how we got enormous quantities of covert, of secret information. He stole it, and then he defected to Russia with it. When in China, in Hong Kong, which is a very secure place for a guy that's a spy, right? He met with the Russian attaché there. That story of him being abandoned in Moscow airport because we took his passport. He suddenly got an apartment there, and I think he will die there. I don't think he'll die an alcoholic. I think at the right time he'll walk in front of a truck on Red Square. And the Russians will find that his usefulness is no longer needed. That country is brutal. They kill anyone that comes in the way of the government. And at some point, if Snowden starts talking back to them, you know, he may find himself on a C-141 transport to the United States or wake up dead, like all the other Russians there do. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Nance. The 2016 election introduced, I think, a whole new vernacular to the American public in terms that, as someone that's been interested in American politics my whole life, I've never heard of. Alt-right, Antifa. Yeah. Two phrases that come to mind now in particular that I'm wondering if you could help to maybe elucidate how we think about and how we can counter are this whole whataboutism and gaslighting in particular. I mean, this whole concept of gaslighting, particularly in the last few days when it seems like there's been this concerted right-wing, Breitbart, Drudge, Daily Caller manipulation of the media to somehow portray the Steele dossier as being a Democratic conspiracy, and because it was paid for by the DNC or Hillary, allegedly, it is somehow completely debunked. How do we, as informed, educated citizens, respond to that? I'm really, at a loss.
Yes, you would be. Gaslighting, for those of you who are oldsters like me, I go look it up. No, do you recall a film? I can't recall its name, but it was about a guy, a husband, and it was a gaslight. There you go. And I love that film. He locks his wife up, and he convinces her over time she's insane, and everything he's doing, she would pour a cup of tea, and he would take it and dump it. And she'd say, "Where's my cup of tea?" And he'd say, "Why, honey, you never poured a cup of tea." All right? That is what I'm talking about when I say they are going into perception management. They are altering your reality. We get a document that we know a year ago. I was one of the first people to see the Steele dossier. David Corn had a copy. He called me, and he said, you're an intel guy, what do you think of this guy? And I'm like, that's like the former director of British intelligence's Russia desk. He's solid. And he goes, what do you think of this? And I was like, what? 35 pages. But, to come to me, it reminds me of 9/11 truthers. I was at the Pentagon on 9/11. I've had people tell me in my face, you did not see an airplane fly into that building. And it's like, first, I wear a ring from 9/11, and I'm tempted to punch you in the face. That's reality. You cannot alter my perception by saying, what does CNN say? Banana, banana, banana. And that's what gaslighting is. And this whataboutism, which is, oh, Donald Trump, Paul Manafort's going to be indicted. There's a prediction I'll make for you, right? Easy one. And somebody goes, well, what about Hillary? What about the emails? What about them? The point is, that is deflection. That, by the way, is an interrogation. It's called a resistance tool, where you have to get them off the subject. And what you find now is those whataboutisms and gaslighting are amplified to the nth degree. Take a stand, the NFL, the stand for the flag, hashtag stand for the flag, Russian. As soon as the NFL players started kneeling when they were going to take a knee, out of nowhere, a Russian hashtag comes up with thousands of bots putting it out. They are altering your perception of what is real and what is not. There is no greater gaslighter than Donald Trump. The man, look, he's the smartest guy in the world. He knows better than the generals. As a matter of fact, no one does, dead soldiers better than Donald Trump does. And he will tell you that. That's gaslighting. You can't believe it. You're all trained now because you've heard me, so you're not susceptible to it. Next question.
We're only going to be able to do one more.
One more. Okay, you can give me afterwards. Those of you
I guess I have a question because one of the holes that I kind of am trying to figure out is like based on like the unraveling of the cyber warfare that Russia was doing, like was the intelligence community already, like it feels like the American intelligence community was steps behind what was happening. Was it just that we were not aware, or we didn't think that they would be doing this, and how do we stop it from happening again is I guess the question.
Well, we knew that there have been other hacks. In the 2008 election, both John McCain and Barack Obama's campaign were hacked by the Chinese. The Chinese collect information and they wait, right? They do the full Fu Manchu thing, where they put the teapot in the sleeves. And they won't tell you that there's a teapot in their sleeve. They watch. But the Russians, they hack as weapons, all right? These are daggers that they sharpen, anything that they take. So in the 2016 campaign, US intelligence was made aware, and as a matter of fact, I wrote about it in my book way back last August when Joy Reid and I were the only two people in the media discussing the Russian hacking as a full-scale Russian operation. She was asked, where do you think we got this information from? And my first guess was Estonian or Ukrainian intelligence. These are the guys who are fluent Russian linguists. But what happens is Americans who go to Russia, they tend to fly out through Poland or the Ukraine or Riga, Latvia. And then they get out of Russia and they think, okay, I'm out of KGB land. And they take their phone out and they start talking. Well, the Estonians don't have a Fourth Amendment. They don't care whether you're a US citizen, they'll monitor everything you have. And we got indications last August that there was a particular American in communications with known Russian intelligence officers coordinating information related to this campaign. That's where it started. When the story comes out and Leonardo DiCaprio has to play a character in this story, he will play, he'll have to put on some weight, but he will play John Brennan, the director of the CIA, who was notified in an extraordinary story that came out in the New York Times earlier this year. As soon as I read it, I cannot confirm whether it's true or not, because it has facets that come from my world. But all I know is I really like that story. And it said John Brennan received a phone call from the director of GCHQ, which is Britain's NSA. Now that's extraordinary because he didn't go to the director of NSA. He went to the director of the CIA and the director of national intelligence. And he said, we have an extraordinary report. And I'm going to fly to Washington to tell you We have liaison officers, we have secure communications, we have secure data links. Why did the director of Britain's spy agency, their secret listening agency, fly? He flew to the United States to brief John Clapper that one of our sister agencies in Eastern Europe found Americans in direct communications with known Russian intelligence officers. And it was so serious, he flew to the United States to give it verbally. That's bad. Because what happens at that point is, Clapper and Brennan got to sit there and got to go, hey, wait a minute, need the FBI to come into the room. FBI came into the room, told the story, that information is now evidence. Now they get a FISA warrant on that American citizen. You guys know when you get that Foreign Information Surveillance Act warrant, you are no longer a US citizen as far as the Constitution is concerned. You are essentially a foreign national committing espionage. And I stunned Chris Hayes one night when we had Carter Page on. And Chris Hayes is like, well, Malcolm, you know, he does have rights. I was like, whoa, Slick. No, he doesn't. Zero. All right? There's an entire group at NSA who can treat him like a Russian intelligence officer because that's what the FISA warrant supposes. If they get that warrant on you, it means we know or we suspect strongly that you're essentially Aldrich James or somebody who is out to betray, Edward Snowden. You're out to betray this government. Or we're going to investigate till we either clear you or not. So that's pretty much why the events are going in the way that they are. U.S. intelligence is on top of it. As a matter of fact, John Brennan called the director of the FSB and said, I know you are involved in hacking this election. I know you are still in operations Knock It Off. They didn't knock it off, and President Obama picked up the red phone in October, called Vladimir Putin and said, if you hack the vote results of this election, we're going to take this, consider it, you know, close to an act of war, He didn't use those exact terms, but he warned Russia off, which is probably why we didn't get any hacked election results. That we know of, right?
Okay, I want to remind everybody that Malcolm is going to stick around for a while, short period, to sign books. If your ticket purchase included a book, you can exchange the blue ticket that was attached to your name tag for your copy at the registration table when you entered. If your ticket did not include a book, but you'd like to purchase one, obviously we'll make that opportunity available to you. Last thing, just if I can ask everybody to hold for a minute. Last thing before we go, we have a special presentation, and I want to bring up Morgan Riley, a current student at West Catholic Preparatory High School, who is going to make a little presentation to a former student at that school.
So get the t-shirt.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder, and thank you, Mr. Nance, for being with us tonight. As mentioned, I'm a senior at West Catholic High School, your alma mater. And we wanted to thank you, and as you mentioned before, your family, for your service to our country and your work in educating the public about counterterrorism and intelligence affairs. You served as a role model to myself and other students at West Catholic. We are so very proud to call you an alumni. Your beginnings as a member of West Catholic's World Affairs Club inspires us all, and even more so myself tonight. It shows us that we too might someday accomplish great things. As a token of our appreciation, I'd like to present you a gift from the West Catholic community.
Before you go, do you speak any foreign languages?
I'm learning French.
Oh, you know, have you thought about my work? Always recruiting. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. We're adjourned.